Hey, welcome to the new episode of Hey Man, It's Okay. I'm your host, Sky. Today, we're going to talk about the Enneagram with special guest Jim Zartman, host of the Art of Growth podcast. Let's get into it. I've come to bring you life. Last chance to put up a fight. So rise again. The end begins, and we will wage the war within. Hi, Jim.
How's it going?
Thanks for joining us today.
The microphones all work. Everyone's sounding good.
Oh, man.
Technical difficulties are subsided.
They are the worst. I hate technical difficulties.
And they happen at the most inconvenient times.
Yeah, super.
Always. Yeah, totally.
Like, when you're trying to set up a podcast and, you've got someone new who you're interviewing on your podcast and then you have technical difficulties. Yeah, it's super fun.
Yeah. Don't feel bad. We recently had one where it took us 30 minutes to get everyone's mic working because it's 6 people on the call.
Oh,
and
geez.
then it took another hour for one of the people's audio to upload. So,
oh, man.
Hey, this is nothing. We are golden.
Well,
Let's
great.
go.
Let's
You
go.
know, I just have to say thank you for being very lenient on everything going on. So
I understand.
It's much appreciated.
I'm usually on your end of the world trying to make everybody's stuff work. So, hey, I'm all good.
Cool. Well, let's get into it. Jim, welcome to our podcast, man. This is awesome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your credentials and kind of why you're on here with us today?
Yeah, my credentials always make me kind of laugh because I always talk about how I'm only interested in things that can never be mastered.
Yeah.
And one of the primary ones is people, because people are endlessly fascinating. They're endlessly deep wells. There is no way that you can ever figure people out. So it's always interesting. But as far as the world that I work in, like this is, the Art of Growth is my full-time job. Cool. I've always been fascinated with personality. I think I read the Myers-Briggs book, Please Understand Me, for the first time when I was 16 years old.
Oh, wow.
And I was always trying to figure out people and understand people, but I was still stuck in the two primary things that people get stuck in, which is they have an interaction that doesn't work out, the relational communication breakdown, conflict, whatever it may be. And so they end up getting stuck in only one of two questions. Either what's wrong with me or what's wrong with them.
Okay.
And some people, their primary question that they operate with is what's wrong with other people.
Yeah. I mean, we all want to know what's wrong with
them,
everybody else.
Right. And then some people, whenever something goes wrong, they really turn it inward. They really turn it on themselves. It's like, what's wrong?
Oh, that's me. 100%.
Right. So most of us go in one of those two directions, but they're different based on your own Enneagram type, your own personality. And so I was stuck in that thing for most of my life. I was trying to figure out, what was wrong with most other people. Like that was the primary question of my life. I was more external in that. I was always trying to understand these things because I was seeing this gap between my intent and my impact. And I was trying to close that distance in any way I can with any tools I could. So I think when I first came across the Enneagram, I thought, oh, maybe this will help me dig at it again because I had done multiple other systems, nothing as nearly as sophisticated as the Enneagram. And it really wrecked me. Like I really had to take a look at myself. I had to deal with my own junk. It made me see myself in a different light and go, oh no, that's what's going on. But I also had this affirmation of like, oh, these things that I take for granted, other people don't have those. I have these kind of superpowers too. So I had this simultaneous experience of like, oh no, that's what other people have been having to deal with me. And oh, cool. There's these other aspects of me that are really, really wonderful. And so my business partner and I, we got into it and we were, having more time talking about it. And he decided to go get certified. And as part of his certification, he had to make recordings of panels. And I can explain more about this at some point if I need to. But a panel is just, 4 people, all of the same type. And the Enneagram is supposed to be based on self-reporting. You telling us what it's like to be you, not based on putting you in some kind of a box. And
Oh,
so
that makes a lot of sense.
panels are really fundamental to the ongoing evolving language and understanding of the types. And so we've always had panels. And so he had to record them to finish his certification. I said, let's throw it on the internet. And then I called him 3 weeks later and I said, hey, we've had more than the couple hundred downloads we were expecting. He's like, well, what do we have? I was like, we're already at 20,000 and we're starting
Whoa.
to have we're starting to have 3,000 a week, 5,000 a week, 10,000 a week. And it just like kept going from there. I said, dude, you got to get a website and I should probably go get certified. And like, what are we going to do? We're starting to get contacted by companies or individuals from all over the place. It just sort of snowballed from there.
Yeah, that sounds like a really cool, like, how cool that it went way better than you guys expected. I mean, that's the dream, right?
It was, I don't know if it is or should be for everyone. And it wasn't really my dream. I had done other podcasts and it was just kind of like an outlet for fun. And it was cool. We needed something to happen because we were actually, both of us at the time were pastors, and we knew we didn't belong or fit really in that world. And we didn't really want to be part of that machine so much, or maybe we were conflicted, but regardless, that part of our lives was on a steep decline simultaneously while the art of growth was on this steep incline.
It was
And so
growing.
they just sort of passed each other in the night, and then we ended up here.
Cool. And how long has it been that you guys have been doing this full time?
Really full time just since the summer of 21,
Okay.
I think. Yeah. So we started the podcast in 2018, and then in 2020 we started getting like our first, like I finished my certification, we got and the world was shut down, everyone was working remote and everyone was trying to figure out how to help with that, and we were already set up for Zoom because that's all we had really done, because we were sort of like, well, that's the only way we're going to be able to meet with this client in Australia, obviously.
Makes sense.
So it just, in 2020 is really when it started to become like, oh, this could be a real business.
That's pretty awesome.
I think it's great that you found a real passion just doing this and you went with it. I think that's also kind of ties into it being the dream.
Yeah, well, I think I'm always driven by curiosity. Like I always just want to understand things, figure things out. And
absolutely.
And I get obsessed with things for a few years, and most of them, like, I got really into leatherworking for a couple years and I made a bunch of leather goods. And, 1 year I was like, I'm going to do a triathlon. And then the last couple years, I'm going to do jujitsu and learn how to surf and do all this different stuff. So, but this is one thing that was like, oh, this is going to take more of my time. And I want it to, because the fundamental mission of my life is to get people out of that stuck place where the only two questions is what's wrong with me or what's wrong with them. Mm-hmm. And I'm deeply passionate about people understanding that they're actually incredible, because people really undervalue themselves.
Oh, that's absolutely. I think it's kind of criminal in a lot of ways, because I find that people focus on the negatives rather than the positives. Like, you have a bad day, you're going to remember that far more than a good day, for instance.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because some types absolutely, and then some types want to ignore all of that and only focus on the positive, to the detriment of actually paying attention to what needs to be solved or corrected. But then you're right that there are some that hyper focus on the negative. And I heard one type 3 in our world say 100 compliments plus 1 criticism equals 1 criticism.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, people tend to have negative things stick out because we, as humans, I think, tend to dwell on the negative, which I think is something that, is hard to get past sometimes.
Well, it's hard to get past because it was a necessity at one point in time. So if you're living 60,000 years ago and you're hunting and gathering, and you hear this little sound in the woods and you think, oh crap, negative, danger, I got to get out of here, you're probably going to survive longer, that trait is going to survive a lot longer than the person that's like down there and being like, it's probably nothing. It's like, no, it's actually a saber tooth. You're actually dead. So
absolutely,
the caveman brain.
Yes, it's still so programmed. Like psychologists actually have an estimate on this, that they say it takes about 1 second for something negative to stick to us. We hear it and boom, it sticks.
I can see that.
It takes about 15 seconds for something positive to have the same kind of psychological effect on the wiring of the brain.
That's very interesting.
Things like mindfulness meditation, like gratitude practice, you're actually hovering in something long enough for it to create a neural network in the brain in a way that something negative can do instantly.
Oh, so negative hurts faster than positive helps.
It sticks. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, that's kind of interesting, because I think making mistakes kind of allows you to learn a lot better, and maybe that kind of contributes to it. But at the same time, I do cardio, and I kind of use that as meditation, and I find it's very good for depression management. So
for sure.
So I kind of wonder if, what you're saying does tie into it allowing you to have more of a positive reflection and allow that to really sink in a lot better. It's sort of connecting to myself that way.
And there is a very different category, danger, instant, immediate danger, or someone did something that I feel, you're in a relationship and someone says something and all of a sudden I feel attacked and all of my defenses are going up. That kind of a situation is very different than like depression, which is like a dragging. It's like walking through the mud and trying to get any kind of movement is really hard.
Yeah.
And so, there's really different mechanisms at work there that I won't pretend to understand.
So, you actually said something, and I want to ask a question about it. You said that you and your business partner used to be pastors. Has that played into your exploration of the Enneagram?
So absolutely.
I know you said they passed each other, but I imagine that it would play into how you feel about things and the way you reflect on things as you learn more and more.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that for me, I won't speak for him, but for me, I just wanted to, I don't know, understand how all these people fit together. There was this, I thought, pretty beautiful image when I was in the church world of this idea of the body of Christ, meaning the combination of humans is the continued incarnation of the divine.
Okay.
So it's not the individual is the expression of the divine, but actually this combination of people where everyone has a part to play and everyone has unique gifts to contribute. I think that was really fascinating to me. And so I think the Enneagram isn't a thing I look at. It's a thing. They're like a pair of lenses that I see so much of the rest of the world.
Oh, I like that. That's beautiful.
And so I think because of having the Enneagram, then I was going to look at the lens through whatever I was doing, whether that was music and arts. I've always been a musician, always been a songwriter. And sometimes I would get stuck too much in the head. Sometimes I just like the sound and the feel of a riff, and it beats very much a physical, like a body sensation thing. And sometimes it was all in the heart, like the emotion thing. But the integration of the three centers, like of head, heart, and body, which is so fundamental to this idea of the Enneagram, is that we're supposed to be these integrated beings. And usually when something goes wrong, when something's off, it's because we've like forgotten one of our core centers. Like we've left out a major component of who we are.
Yeah. Well, I know we've mentioned the Enneagram several times. Can you explain to us and our listeners? I mean, I know, but can you explain what the Enneagram is, since you're the professional here?
Absolutely. I'm kind of filling in the role as the newcomer to the Enneagram.
Yeah, well, it's humans have always been trying to create models of understanding, right? And I can't remember the statistician that said all models are useful but wrong. And I think that's a really important thing to understand here. But what the Enneagram is it is a very elegant system for understanding humans' core motivations and the patterns that are created in order to meet the need of that core motivation. So, where a lot of personality systems focus on what you do, the Enneagram is very focused on why you do it. What is the driving motivator for your actions? Because lots of people will do the same action, but they'll do it for very different reasons. And so in the Enneagram, you have these 9 types. And as we always tell people, you have all 9 types within you in different percentages. You heard every message coming at you as a young person, but certain messages stuck. Certain messages said, this is important. Certain experiences said, I need to do this. I need to use this strategy in my life. And whether that strategy was, I have to be as good as possible, or I have to help everyone, or I have to be a high achiever, or I have to be able to freely express my emotions, or I have to be very logical and linear, and I have to anticipate danger, or I need to think about the joy and the possible futures and put my energy and focus on that so I don't have to dwell on the negative, or I have to be strong and conquer the world because it's going to kill you if you don't, or I have to neutralize and merge in order to go along with the flow. So I just went through all 9 types right there, just with mini descriptions to say there's just very different ways that we respond to a world in order to feel safe and to get our core needs met.
Absolutely. I think it's great that you actually did say that we all have all 9 types. It's kind of like what I've talked with Sky before on previous episodes, where I consider myself an introvert, but I also kind of see it like it's a spectrum where some days I'm a lot more extroverted and some days I'm a lot more introverted. So it's ever changing, and kind of relating it back to Enneagram. I would say, some days you're definitely feeling like you're a more prominent type, but other days maybe you're displaying a different number.
Well, a lot of times it's situational. Like if I'm in a situation where my core pattern or strategy doesn't work, or it's repeatedly failing, then I'm going to lean into one of the other resource points or another type. So typically in the Enneagram, you have a core type. So let's say like a type 9. And if their strategy isn't working, they're either going to lean a little bit more into the 8 or a little bit more into the 1. So they're going to lean into one of their neighbors to develop another adaptation. But then there's this triangle of the type 9, type 3, and type 6 in the Enneagram. And those are resource points for the 9, the 6, and the 3. 1 is the gas pedal, the 3, and the 6 is the brake, if you're talking about the type 9. And so then they really lean into those. So a lot of times people develop one of their neighbors more, or what's often in the Enneagram called a wing, or they'll lean into one of these resource points.
Yeah, so I discovered the Enneagram through some friends. I belonged to a maker space here in Washington, and we just got talking with these people once, and they were super into the Enneagram. And I have to tell you, the first time I took the test, took me about 7 minutes to take the test. The first time I took the test, I wept because I had never seen anything describe my personality more than that did. And not only did it show me my personality, it showed me things that I didn't really know how to put into words, and it just laid it all right out there. And it's been an extremely helpful tool to me and my wife and my friends. We've all figured out how to communicate better, how to better talk to each other so that we all can kind of cohabitate and be the best version of ourselves. And it's been so amazing. So the Enneagram is actually something we use pretty much daily, and it's one of my favorite tools in my tool belt.
Yeah, and I've found that so often people who invest the time and actually get to know the system like that, that's exactly what happens, because you aren't stuck in those 2 questions anymore, right?
Yeah.
You're not stuck in only all the ways I'm not enough or I'm too much, right? Those messages that come at us. I can look at your perspective, and I'm not just filling in the story with my own experience. I can actually have a better sense of where you're coming from And so I think it is the most useful tool for creating empathy, because like for me, my natural wiring is I'm not extremely empathetic. I don't feel other people's feelings the same way. Or I do at times and then it goes, but it's not ever been a highly developed part of my life. But this goes, oh, I can put myself in your shoes. And my starting point now is I'm imagining the most generous interpretation of your actions. That's my starting point now.
Okay. That's really interesting. So I'll share. I'm a 2. I am a 2 through and through. In fact, before the podcast, I did go ahead and take the Art of Growth Enneagram test, and yours had a percentage, and I was 93% type 2, which didn't surprise me one bit, because I knew I'm very much 2 through and through, especially because I've done the inner work to grow and to be at the healthiest level that I can, and try to stay up there as much as possible. And my wife is a type 1, very much type 1. And it's been really good for us because she knows that I need to be needed and I know that she needs to be organized.
Yeah.
Which has been really funny. But yeah, I like how you're talking about how everyone kind of has parts of every number, and it makes it a lot easier when you realize that, to integrate with other people. Now, if I'm not mistaken, Jim, you are type 8, correct?
I am a type 8, yes.
So you're a challenger.
I'm a challenger. I have this high need to make sure my life is organized in a way that I am not controlled by external forces or external people. And if I'm in a situation where that happens, I have a strong reactivity to it. And because there's this core need that fundamentally the world is not a good place and you're going to get killed if you're not prepared to kill. And so like the armor went on pretty early. It's because a lot of 8s have this rep of like they're not very sensitive.
I know I have a few 8s in my life who definitely are not sensitive, and they just like to give you trouble.
But I believe, and I've seen this consistently, when they do their work, they actually realize that they're extremely sensitive, and that's why they had to armor up so early on. And the armor came on very strong, and I had to tell myself the story that I'm not affected by other people and that I don't care what they think or whatever. But that's not the truth of what's happening, because I always wanted to belong, but I refused to fit some other mold or do what other people expected in order to fit in. So this combat between fitting in and belonging was always at war. The conflict between being sensitive and needing to be strong and not expose vulnerability because you'll be taken advantage of, we're always at odds with each other.
Wow. Yeah, I imagine that was kind of a crazy realization for you, especially after you had done the Myers-Briggs stuff and kind of seen a couple different areas of your personality.
Yeah, I mean, I saw kind of like the way I navigated the world a little bit through those systems, but when I saw some of this stuff, I was just like, this is an interesting thing to me. I had a different relationship with my memories. So I have this very underdeveloped theory about how, you grow up, you have tons of experiences, and your mind chucks most of your memories. It's like, that's not important.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the Inside Out. It's the memory dump. It's just like,
I was just thinking about that.
Exactly. You're always going to remember that double mint commercial. Yeah, it's always got things that it's getting rid of, right? But certain core memories of your childhood stuck. They stuck in there good. And I believe that those stories are something you must become a student of, because you hung on to those for a reason. They're trying to tell you something about your personality. And often with coaching clients, I'll actually walk through some of their memories with them, and we'll talk about the message that they absorbed through that memory, why their mind probably held on to it, why it was important. Because I think that with all the stuff we chuck, whatever we held on to is like a riddle that's asking to be solved in our lives. It's something that's wanting to unlock a true part of our identity so that we can have a better sense of belonging, so we can live into our purpose, because it's always going to follow in that train.
I mean, more than that, it sort of molded us because it is such a core memory to us, dating back from yesteryear. So, absolutely.
And some people carry more of an awareness of the stories that were important, and some not so much. Like I had zero clue. Until I understood the Enneagram, I looked at a lot of stories in my life as neutral that I now look back on and I'm like, that is not normal, or that is not like a neutral experience. Like that was a defining moment.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy. It's funny because I had already been doing a lot of internal work in myself when I discovered the Enneagram. I started therapy in 2019, which I've talked about on the podcast before, but I mean, I can tell you about that later. But yeah, I started my journey in 2019 into therapy, and I learned mindfulness. Oh my gosh, mindfulness changed my life. And I had been doing this inner work to try to be better, but I knew that there was something holding me back. And the universe showed me to these people who introduced me to the Enneagram, and I realized the one thing that's really holding me back was loving myself.
Yeah.
So it really made me go into this self-reflection and figure out, okay, why can't I love myself? Why can't I tell myself, hey, you're a good-looking dude, like take off your shirt, who cares, whatever. And I fully believe, yeah, it is those core memories that your brain holds on to that makes you so that you're hesitant, or that you jump balls to the wall, you're in it. So it's my, like I said, it's my favorite learning tool, and it's my favorite way to like look back and reflect. I like the way you put that it's your core memories are there for a reason to learn from.
Yeah, and this is something that they often work on in therapy, and I think that's a great tool. But so many people come to us sort of like after the therapy. They're like, "Well, what now? How do I create the journey, the life that I want, based on the way I'm wired?" Because how do you honor that wiring? There's the healing, which is kind of like redoing the foundation of the building, and then there's the purpose and mission that comes out of who you naturally are, because I deeply believe that who you most naturally are is what the world most needs from you.
Okay.
That's beautiful. And I do want to say I appreciate that you're calling this a tool, because my biggest fear is people will look at this and use it as an excuse to label themselves, or use as an excuse to label others, when I don't think that's true at all. It's not like, I know the Zodiac gets a bad reputation, like that's such a Scorpio or something like that. It's like that's not what it's about. That's never what it should be about. It's a tool, and I think you're right. It should be used to help allow us to understand ourselves better, and also what direction we'd like to go in the future.
Yeah, and some people absolutely do that. They're like, "Well, I can't help it. I'm just a 4, so I'm just this way," or they say it to their friends, "Oh, you're just such a 6. You got to stop worrying all the time." And I do hate that stuff, because it, like any tool, can be ruined and be very reductionistic. And in the Enneagram world, there's a lot of people who do that. In the Enneagram world, there's people who really focus on the shadow side and what's wrong, and they still treat you like a problem to be fixed. But whenever people try and do that, they're using the type to try and fix the type, and you cannot create solutions with the same strategy that created the problem. And so it's really like they're kind of wasting the tool in that regard, because the tool is there to reveal, so that we can increase our level of self-awareness. Like I wish everyone had your experience, Sky, where you read it and you just have this like emotion overcomes you. I mean, some people I know, I always remember one friend who said she saw her type and read it and got so angry, like she walked away from the Enneagram for a year. And yep, I get it, because some people have that reaction too. They're just like total anger or denial or whatever, and everyone around them is just being like, "Oh, this is so you. Oh my goodness, isn't that so? Yes, she's like this." And then they just wither, because they're
that
like,
would be frustrating.
I can see that.
I'm so exposed, right? And I've had this happen in corporate settings. Like I'm working with a Fortune 100 company, and there's like 20 people in the room, and then someone just starts to wither, and I'm just like, "It's okay. You totally just back out. You don't have to answer any more questions," because I don't want them to like have that shutdown. And that's really hard too, because they're actually, for some types, that feels very exposing, And I don't want people to be exposed. Like, the point is that you know that you're awesome. But when it comes to your weaknesses, like, guess what? Everyone around you already sees them. They're not a mystery.
So and then, of course, you got the insecurities coming out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you find that you find more people who are for it or more people who are against it?
Way more that are for. Way more.
That's good.
Even in these companies where they're basically told they have to do this, even in that setting, most of the time it's a very positive thing. And by the end of the very first, training with us, they're going, "Oh, so when we had this interaction, that's what you were thinking?" "Yeah, that's what I was thinking. That's the point I was trying to get across. I didn't see that because I was coming from this perspective." And they catch on really quickly. But of course, in any situation, you have people who are just like, "Nope."
Yeah, you've always got those stubborn ones who, they just choose not to look at themselves.
Yeah. And since this podcast is called Hey Man, It's Okay, and you're specifically trying to talk to men and about their mental health, I will say that this is far more popular with women. Almost 90% of our listenership of our podcast is women. The clients, the people who bring us into the corporations, most of this is women, because I think a lot of men, and I've seen this, I shouldn't say I think, I've witnessed a lot of men, they err towards this thing of feeling exposed, of feeling like someone is going to have some like level of power over them, or they're going to be treated differently. And there is an extent where it's a harder road for them to climb for whatever reason. I haven't totally figured out. I really want to. I mean, you guys probably know more about this, and I'm curious what you've seen or come across. Have you come across stats on this as far as like men's willingness to go into therapy?
I mean, I don't have any like scientific stats, but I know, like, just like in my normal life, I have seen so many men who I talk to and who just don't want to talk about their feelings, and they just bottle things up. And I think that makes sense because the Enneagram really opens you up to your vulnerabilities and shows you what your core fears are. And, that's kind of why, that's the reason we started this podcast, was because there's too many men who aren't out there talking about their feelings, who aren't talking about the things that make them better. They're just trying to, they're doing great for their family. They're doing good for their family, but they're not taking care of themselves.
And then, of course, you have toxic masculinity playing into everything. And there's the stereotype that, oh, man can't experience emotions. That's weakness. I got to be big, strong, and tough. I got to be a manly man. And, it's criminal because everybody feels emotions. Everyone experiences everything. No one's really immune to that. And I think at the end of the day, it's better to confront it than ignore it, because you're just ultimately going to bottle it up, and eventually that bottle is going to get to capacity and everything's going to explode and overflow. And that's not a situation anyone needs to put themselves in.
Well, the data supports what you're saying, Mike, because it's like someone who avoids conflict. You're actually not avoiding it. You're just punting it down. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of men, they just keep punting it down, and they don't develop the daily skills of interacting with their emotions. And so they're unprepared when they hit a real traumatic event or a real tragedy. And then all of a sudden, all of it comes snapping in at once, and then they're underprepared. But I think that
would be my personal story. There is, I kind of just had a really big tragic event happen that really brought it all together.
Yeah. And it's great because not everyone's story is like you, Sky. That not everyone goes and then gets the help they need. They just stay in that space, or they deny, they build taller walls and deeper moats. Like, that's the strategy. And it doesn't work, because eventually this is going to blow up in your face. But I think, there is all this talk about toxic masculinity and stuff like that. And I think men are given a bad rap in a lot of ways, because there's this fundamental message that's been in the background of men for all of time. And that is that men are expendable. You're here to die.
Yeah.
So when I say that to men, it goes deep and they're like, oh God, I know that feeling. Because when you
Right.
think about it, if, if there's any kind of a threat coming towards, who do you send out? You send out the men. If the boat's going down, put the women and children on the boats, the men go down with the boat. It's like that. Somebody was joking about, that's why all the groomsmen are dressed the same, because if one goes down, you just step over into the next. They're all identical. But I think that men at this deep visceral level feel this thing of like, I am here to die. I am expendable. And therefore, either I don't want to waste my time like cycling around this stuff, but like we're not living in danger like that, and we're still reacting like we are. And I think there is a time to go, I will deal with this later, and I need to get this functional thing done to take care of my family or protect them against the coming crisis, whether it's physical or economical or whatever it is. And I understand that. But when there's a time for peace, you do need to go into that reflection, because you're actually building the capacity muscles for dealing with everyday life, dealing with, like, if you can't handle rejection, how are you going to be a good partner long term?
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
If you can't handle some of these different little things as far as interacting, you can't back down, you're probably not going to have a lot of success in certain parenting strategies, for instance. I'm just taking that one from experience.
It's like I told Sky in one of the previous episodes, quoting from a song, a lyric specifically, making mistakes is proof that you're being challenged. And I like to think that it's a learning mechanism, and sometimes it's hard to take criticism. Sometimes it's hard to accept failure, but I think ultimately we become better for it because we learn so much from doing it.
We can choose to learn from it, but I think we have pretty good evidence that not everyone does.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
Fair point.
I agree with that. That's why I think we have, the stigma against men who want to go talk about their feelings or talk about the mental health and care for themselves, because they've been told for so long, it's not okay for you to not be okay. Like, you need to be fine all the time. And, my big message, I mean, I don't know if I have a TikTok, and I end every TikTok with, it's okay to not be okay, because it's something that I truly believe in. So how do we, as these men who are diving into this, not industry, but into this profession of talking with people and sharing our message with people, how do we go about increasing the number who are okay talking about it? How do we work on ending the stigma? Because that's really what this is all about, is finding the right tools to stop that. But how do we reach and connect with people who aren't willing to look at themselves?
Yeah.
Like, that's the big question.
So one of the major factors that contribute to that issue in our particular society is it's a pretty recent thing in human history, and it's that we no longer have rituals of passage, things that you do that say you are now a man. Because in order to go through a ritual of passage, you have to have someone who's taking you through the ritual. You have to have someone who's taking you, who's setting the example for you. So I think to impact this as best we can is we have to be people who are setting the example and doing sort of a ritual initiation sometimes of a man into his emotions. And I think that comes by leading with our own and being transparent with our own.
Yeah.
So just recently, I had a real overwhelming experience with grief a couple weeks ago, and I was really, really stuck in it. My father passed away in September, and I was starting to feel not the sorrow about that, but I was starting to feel this overwhelming sense of grief and really anger of what I never had, because he was always disabled. He had a brain tumor before I was born.
Okay.
I never had a dad that I could look up to. because of, I needed to be strong so that I wasn't taking more energy from, mom who needed to take care of dad, and sister who was in a lot of chaos of her own. And so I like always felt, relatively unsupported, and I knew it would be there if I would have asked for it. But the story I told myself is I can't ask for it because
we don't want to be a burden, right?
don't want to be a burden, and you have other things to deal with, and I can handle this myself, so I'm not going to put this on you. And so I started actually feeling some of the sorrow of all of that since my dad passed away, and a lot of grief about the loss of, I for a long time I had given my life to my faith, and I'd given my life to the church, and I went through a major deconstruction of my faith. So I felt like, and then, I had wanted to lean into this church world, and then the, sort of seeing behind the scenes and being a part of it and feeling compromised of being like, I don't like this either. So I felt like I was going through the grief of, yes, losing my father, but I was also the death of the God as I knew him. And so Father God and Mother Church had also died in the last couple of years as I knew them. And that was so much a part of my identity. So I was just like churning in all this grief. So I'm talking about, setting example, like being able to say this stuff. So I'm saying it now.
Yeah.
Also, what did I do? I called two friends and I said, I need to download some stuff. People who I know are for me, but they're objective observers of my life. So I'm not dumping all this stuff just on my wife. Like she wants to know about it, but I'm not looking to her to fulfill that emotional support role because she's too closely intertwined with it. And so I needed like objective outsiders to observe it. This is why a therapist or a coach or a certain people in a community are really helpful for this kind of a function. So I asked them to dinner and I just downloaded all of it. And as I was saying it, I even realized some resentments that I had not realized I had, so voicing some of this stuff. And then for me, how I process often is I need to get my body in movement. Kind of like Mike was talking about a moving meditation. And so the next morning I got on my bike and I rode for 50 miles and I just like took 5 hours out by myself for the day to kind of be in silence and let this stuff sort of process. And that was 2 weeks ago. And my mental health has been much better over the last couple weeks because I saw the pattern going and I was like, I need to ask for help, which is the hardest thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then I need to take time for myself to do something that makes me feel like I can process and that I'm alive. So taking that action of, for me, I always say it's movement and beauty. So it's often long bike rides by the ocean or surfing, paddleboard surfing or something like that. So I need to ask for help. I need to share honestly. I need to be vulnerable. And then I need to process this through my body in some way.
But how do you get to the point where you admit to yourself that you need to ask for help? Because I think that's the first step. Like, is that something you realize yourself, or is that something? Did you say you're married, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been married for over 17 years. Yeah,
or is that something
congratulations
that your wife says, "Hey, I've noticed this about you. I think it's time to talk about it." Or are you self-reflective enough that you're like, "Okay, I know I'm feeling this, and I need to like go talk to somebody."
Yeah, for sure. Because I know now the consequence of burying it. And what I say about the Enneagram often is one of the best gifts that the Enneagram has given me is that the amount of time I spend disrupted has been dramatically shortened, where something would have happened in my life and I could have been off for weeks, months, even just drowning in that thing because I didn't know how to ask for it. I didn't know how to take time for myself. I didn't know how to stop and not keep going. All of those things that I now know. So the things that used to take me a week or two to deal with, I'll now deal with like in a matter of hours because I experience it. I have the self-awareness. So I can see it. And then I can go into, like self-observation so I can see how I'm experiencing it and start to look at a broader way. And then I can go into a transformational habit of doing something about it. Because I always say, like, the steps of growth is unbeknownst to you and not because of anything you've done wrong, just the hand you were handed. You've been falling in the same hole your entire life. And self-awareness is just like, oh, now I walk up and I see the hole. I still fall into it most of the time, but I at least see it now. And then the third stage of health is walking up, seeing the hole and walking around it. And then not judging myself for each of those stages, because acceptance is the first stage. So when I think about like these stages of like, how did you know you asked for help, whatever? Well, the first step is actually acceptance. And I don't mean the weak acceptance of like, I'm fine, you're fine, everything is fine, I just accept this is just the reality. No,
Yeah.
it's the deep acceptance of this is where I actually am and I can admit it. That's what I mean by acceptance.
Okay.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what advice would you give to somebody who's just looking at diving into the Enneagram,
Like
as
myself.
like a tool? Yeah, like Mike actually just took the test right before we recorded, right before yesterday, and got his results, and he's like a 26% 4 or something like that.
21% 4, also tied in
Which was his
with,
highest.
let's see, it was type 4 and type 6 were 21, and then type 1 and type 5 were 14%, and those were also tied.
So yeah, he's very new to this. So like,
yeah. So
what should they look for?
The first thing I always say is that all tests are at best about 60% accurate, because we don't just answer what is, we answer the way we think we should. And so all of us can kind of get stuck in that. So the gold standard, and I come from the Enneagram and what's called the narrative tradition. That was through my certification, because it's based on your story. So I believe that personality is best understood when observed by a person. Go figure. So when I'm interviewing someone, I'm not just listening for what they say. I'm listening for, do they have a lot to say about that or a little bit? How much energy is behind it when they say that? Do they kind of say it and then look back at me to see what I thought of that thing they just said? So I'm looking at the body language. I'm looking for the energy. I'm looking at all of these things to observe what's actually going on with this person. That the way that someone present their energy that they bring to the room, intentionally or not, I want to observe that. I want to see that. So for someone who's just starting out, though, take a bunch of those tests. Take a few of them.
Actually, this is the third test, because we tried to do an Enneagram test before, or we tried to do an episode, and it kind of got scrapped a little bit for technical reasons. Go figure, right? But I remember in that test, I think 2 was my highest, followed by 4. And based on what I see, I think I do agree that I am more of a type 4 based on what I'm reading and what I'm seeing. But again, it's kind of like what you're saying, take a bunch of other tests.
Yeah. I mean, the gold standard is obviously, booking a typing session with me, but that's expensive. That's not for everybody. And that's a lot of times, like if you can get your job to pay for it or something, that's pretty great. But, which is often how it does happen for us. But, take a few, and whatever your top, you might get your top 2 or 3 answers. Like it's probably one of those. And then just take your time, explore. Like one of the main reasons we put out the panels podcast is because people would go, oh, those are my people. Those people are in my heads. I was listening to the type 5s and oh man, they are inside my head right now. And I think that experience is one of the best ways to get to know your type, is actually listen to other people that you suspect of having the same type. But I always tell people, like, it's more important to find your work than your type. Like people obsess about finding the right type, which is fine. It's good to have that piece, to have the accuracy of knowing your right type. But honestly, that's not the main thing. The main thing is like, are you developing the muscles of self-observation and grace for yourself? Are you allowing yourself the space to ask yourself questions that you've never asked? Because for a lot of men, they come to one of these tests and they've been like, I have never once thought about any of these questions. It happens to me all the time. I'll sit with someone and I'll ask them a bunch of questions and they're like, I've never been asked questions like this. And so being, actually processing an answer that's authentic to you can sometimes take time.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Just don't be in a hurry to like, I have to figure it out right now. It's like, go on an exploration of yourself, become a student of your story, a student of your own life, a student of your memories, a student of what the people around you say, and you're going to be making the movement needed for better mental and emotional health. And if you're in the direction, if you're in that train, then you are absolutely going to get there and everyone around you will appreciate it. Right. But you can't have this instantaneous answer, which is, honestly, sometimes I think the Enneagram is, as wonderful it is, it's very much conflicted with the culture of the time, which is, I want to be able to take a test and know right now. I want to find out my type within 10 minutes.
We are definitely an instant gratification society.
Yeah, I want to know, and I want to know what to do about it. And you can't.
So besides your test, do you know ones that you find are pretty accurate that you could recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I like the Truity one. That
was the first one I took, was the Truity one.
Yeah, the Enneagram Institute, the language is a little outdated, but it's still pretty solid. Like, I know a lot of people that still get good results from that one. Those are the only couple that I know of. One of the additional ones that we've done is there's variance on each type. When you meet 10 of the same type and you realize they're very, very different from each other, one of the key ways is because what we call the instinctual variance. Is this if it's a type 3, are they a social type 3, a sexual 3, or a self-preservational 3? So that's going to change a lot. So we put a instincts test on our website, and that you don't need a person to observe. Like, it's pretty straightforward. You can figure out the order of your instincts. And a lot of times I think that's a great starting point, because the instincts, your lowest instinct, your repressed or resisted instinct, is often causing more problems in your life than even your type is. So I think that's a really good thing to do, because when you combine the instinct and the type, yes, like I said, this is starting to get complicated, right? So take your time. Don't rush into this. But when you have the instinct and the type, then you have a picture of who you are that goes, oh my goodness, I really see this at work.
I kind of want to look this up just because I feel that it gives a better understanding of Enneagram and just a person themselves. Because, like you're saying, I could be a type 4, but I might not be the same as another type 4 if I were to run into them randomly.
Yeah, I think if I was to put it in order of like best case scenario to worst case scenario, I would say most people come and they take a test right away. And I think that's probably like the third best option. I think the first best option is to like I said, do some kind of a typing interview with someone who really knows their stuff. But I think a very close second is simply interacting with your friends and your friends talking about it together. Like Sky's example, I think that's a great context. If you have a group of people that are all going to explore it together, fantastic. Then the next one down, I would say, was just listening to panels and seeing who you really resonate and identify with. And then the next one down.
You guys just started a new panel series.
Yes.
Which I'm very excited to listen to.
Yeah, and it's really getting back to basics. So I think if you jumped on the Art of Growth now, the season we're in, we've only released the 8 and the 9, and then the 1 comes out next week. And whenever this airs, the whole season might be out. I don't know. But it's really great as far as just discussing the core motivation and strategies of each type with a panel of participants. And they are amazing because they're also talking about like how they're growing, because the growth path does not look the same for all of us. And so I love the specificity of being like, well, what ground will I grow well in? Will I thrive in? What kind of nutrients does the soil need for me to become someone who's really living into their identity, their community, and their purpose? If we
That's
can
awesome.
get there, then we're really on track.
That's
Good
awesome.
analogy.
Yeah. Well, Jim, thank you so much for joining Mike and I today. We really appreciated the conversation, the answers, the questions. So, I mean, I hope maybe we'll have you on again. Maybe we'll talk about something else when we learn some more about the podcast and kind of where we're going.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting to hear Mike explore his own journey with this a bit more, and then circle back and have an update when he's had some time to explore that for a while, and then see what impact it's had on your life, and kind of bookend it with that at some point would be really interesting.
That would be really great. So yeah, I guess that's it for now for this episode of Hey Man, It's Okay. Make sure to check out our website, heymanitsokay.com. We are on social media at Hey Man, It's Okay on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok if you're into that sort of thing. So until next time, this is Sky signing off, and it's okay to not be okay.
You want to take our test, any of these tests at theartofgrowth.org. And you can also reach out to me if you want to schedule a typing interview there.
Yeah,
Hell
awesome.
yeah.
Anything to add, Mike?
Well, everyone's different, and understand it's a tool, and it's very good to know yourself so you can make educated guesses and plan for the future.
Yeah. And thank you all for having me so much. If I would want to remind anyone to close, I would remind them that there is nothing wrong with you, and
Absolutely
you have a lot
not.
of work, and you have a lot of work to do.
Mm-hmm. We all have homework.
That's a good thing to keep in mind
homework.
regularly.
Yeah, buddy. Thank you so much, guys.
But thanks,
thank
everyone.
you.
We'll talk to you on the next episode of Hey Man, It's Okay.
Booyah.
Bye.
Adios.
That's why